and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 29 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Alright, so last we left off, everybody's kind of in the belly of the beast here. Ed and Al are being escorted to visit Wrath, and I believe they're not really aware of his true identity thus far. Meanwhile, Ling has sort of been subsumed by greed, and worse yet, he has aligned himself with Father rather than rebelling as the previous greed had done. So despite everybody's bigger understanding of what's going on, the situation as a whole is considerably worse. So, I mean, Edward and Alphonse now know that, everything is right under Central and has been this whole time. So, that's not good. But at the same time, they're, I guess, sort of aware of the magnitude of the threat, At this point, now that they know, they can begin making actual countermeasures. And I guess to sort of, drive home that sense of optimism, Edward shares the information that Alphonse does indeed still have a body somewhere. So, all hope is not yet lost. Oh, that's a plot twist. So Mei Chang is sort of, hiding out inside Alphonse's hollow torso. Historically, Alphonse is, 1 for 1 on people getting killed who are trying to hide out in his armor? So, maybe this isn't a really good idea. But at the same time, there wasn't much other choice given the circumstances. So here we have it, the big revelation. The Ulrich brothers suspected that Bradley was up to no good, but the truth is that he is a homunculus. So Ed sort of astutely surmises that everyone's being held hostage here, essentially. All of Mustang's subordinates have been transferred. I like how they're all sort of thinking the same thing. Bradley has but one sword with him. He must be very confident. And that's not a good sign. Oh, there we go. Wrath wasn't telling lies. He told you to suspect everyone, including himself, and not to dig any deeper. Man. Man, everybody's sort of stuck in this unfortunate position of knowing what's going on, but not being readily able to do anything about it. Although I do find it interesting that Ed thinks that the whole State Alchemist business was just a method of finding sacrifices. That might not be too far off the mark. If there were a method of finding the appropriate people, this would be the way to do it. And indeed, Bradley actually went to Izumi sort of offering her the position. So I guess that sort of checks out. So just to drive the point home, Wrath is sort of tacitly threatening Winry, He's not saying anything, but he's just saying, hey, she's like family to you, right, huh? And she hangs out in Rizenbul a lot? He doesn't need to explicitly say anything, but it's pretty clear what he means. So this is interesting. Alphonse sort of asks if they can continue the search to get their bodies back, and Wrath allows it, So, obviously, they're going to be doing something, They're not just going to sit idly by and let bad things come to pass. So I'm wondering if they're being allowed to act more or less on their own, out of hubris or overconfidence. Ooh. Alright, so Mustang's asking the big questions here. So I guess that's another suspect, and for Mustang, Wrath would be a rather, I guess, prime suspect, considering he is a traitor. Man, that's a bit sudden of Wrath to sort of just impale Ed through the side. Or Alphonse, rather. So I guess the record is now 1 for 2 in terms of Wrath killing people hiding inside of Alphonse. Luckily for Mei Chang, she has such a small stature that she's able to sort of, hide in one of his legs. So almost right away, they've gone immediately back to scheming, it would seem. Can't say I blame them, this is a rather tenuous position. Oh dear. That first shot of Armstrong disquiets me somewhat, because, it almost seems to indicate that he's aligned himself with the villains. On the one hand, if Armstrong knows what's going on, I doubt he would actually go along with it, but if he doesn't know, I feel like he would follow orders. Alright, so here we have it. Ed wanted to call Winry, presumably to check up on her, make sure she's not being followed or anything. At the same time, I feel like calling over an unsecured line probably isn't the best idea. You know, I think she's taking entirely the wrong lesson from this phone call here. You know, if Ed's worried, and he normally doesn't worry, perhaps he has good cause to be worried, so you should in turn worry yourself. So this is interesting. You know, Greed was sort of watching out, sort of listening in on them. I don't know, he doesn't seem like he's truly acting as an agent of Father. Yeah, so it really seems like in spite of working for Father, he's not a really zealous and loyal minion. More like a minion out of convenience rather than anything else. You know, he's sort of, I guess, taking requests from Ling to deliver a message to Lanfan. Yeah, I mean, like, despite ostensibly working for Father, Greed really is an unknown element here. Because we've already seen him oppose Father. You know, it did end with him getting killed, but now that he's back, I feel like we could reasonably assume he might betray Father again. So now the plot gets a little bit thicker. Scar, who's been sort of lurking around and licking his wounds, has now come across Dr. Marco. And I feel like these two are a rather serendipitous pair to meet each other. You know, Dr. Marco, who took part in the Ishbalan Civil War, in some capacity at least, and Scar, who's made it his business to basically kill every state alchemist there is. I find it interesting that Marco is almost joyful that Scar has shown up, you know, and he declares, "I'm the alchemist responsible for the death of your people," you know. Judgment has come and he eagerly awaits it. You know, I have to sympathize with the doctor a bit. You know, he seems to have involuntarily started running a halfway home for injured girls, as he so eloquently put it. Oh dear. Seems that Ling sent a rather unfortunate message. I'll take that back. Those are tears of joy. Well, that's good, I guess, you know. Ling found a Philosopher's Stone, so now they can theoretically leave if Greed weren't in charge of his body. You know, I suspect that Ling is just sort of like biding his time, waiting to wrest back control of his body. You know, that would seem to be the intelligent play here. Oh, that's very interesting. Like, even Wrath is surprised by Ling's sudden outburst. So that cements it, you know, despite Greed being in control, his grip over Ling's body is far from absolute, and, you know, if he gets a little lax in maintaining his control, Ling can sort of slip through and interject. Oh dear. So Armstrong's having a rough go of things here. I mean, the revelation of what precisely has been going on is definitely not good. I think Mustang calls it pretty accurately in that Armstrong's disposition does not lend him to dealing with stuff like this. He's too idealistic. Now this is interesting, you know. Armstrong couldn't stomach what happened at Ishval, and thus he was temporarily discharged. And that's never sat quite right with him, you know. He ran away once before, running away is no longer an option. If nothing else, I admire that. So that's interesting. Mustang sort of compares himself in an offhand way to the homunculi, in that, you know, his alchemy has made him a potent weapon, and people often refer to him as such, and that he has the self-awareness to say that he only truly feels human when he is fighting monsters. That is very interesting. You know, I guess it's sort of like sort of situation where you look into the void and the void looks back into you. You know, he who fights monsters and all that. So meanwhile, Lan Fan is sort of doing what Edward had done before, and she's sort of rushing a recovery to get a prosthetic arm. I mean, that's not necessarily a good approach, considering that I'm sure she's going to insist on far less recovery time than even Edward undertook. Uh-oh. So unfortunately for Alphonse, Mei Chang and Lan Fan are avowed enemies. And man, like, ostensibly they're both injured and they shouldn't be fighting. Man, I feel like he's gonna have to, like, crack a few skulls to get him to calm down. You know, they're dead set on killing each other with knives. Oh, here we go. You know, that's the right approach. Don't piss off the doctor, man. You know, he doesn't have much bedside manner, but he makes it pretty clear that he's not going to allow any sort of fighting or else. Man. You know, I do have a fair bit of respect for the doctor, despite being a rather curmudgeonly fellow. Alright, here's a little plot thread here. You know, the doctor has an estranged wife and son. I mean, I guess that explains why he's so miserable and bitter all the time. The only question now is, how's that gonna get resolved? Alright, so the plot continues twisting a little bit further. Edward is able to use alchemy again, You know, it seems like Father might have to be actively denying someone alchemical power. You know, I take that back. Based on these guys' testimony, it's more like mass denial over a time frame, I guess. You know, other people were similarly afflicted in that they couldn't do anything. So there's a whole bunch of little plot threads here. You know, Father can stop people from using alchemy, but only some people and only some of the time. Scar and Mei Chang are exempted for reasons that are unclear. You know, perhaps the denizens of Xing know something the Mestrian citizens don't. So a whole lot of interesting things going on with few answers so far. So this is interesting, you know. There's a shot of Marco sort of talking and confessing to Scar. We see Father, you know, producing another little gluttony. I find it interesting that he's begging for death as a form of atonement. But at the same time, I feel like Scar would say only true forgiveness can be given by you living and atoning. You know, death might not be enough. I find it interesting that he's demanding the truth. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.